This is NICU Babies Parent Support with Catherine Whitaker, a podcast from Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit that provides free personalized support, resources, and community before, during, and after a NICU stay. My conversations here will focus on education and personal stories with medical and hospital professionals, counselors, therapists, and NICU moms and dads from across the country. Whether you're preparing for a NICU stay, you're currently there, or you're months and years past your stay, you belong here. The NICU is hard. We're here to help. I'm your host, Catherine Whitaker, the mom of 6 children, including my very own NICU baby, and I'm so honored you're here. Well, happy June, everyone. I know that we are thick in the middle of thinking about where do we want to take our family this summer. Sometimes we take just a small little trip. It's just a few hours away, and sometimes we get in our van with 12 seats and 6 children and drive 5,000 miles. There's really no in between with us. It's either this small trip or this epically big trip. But in the early days, when I had 5 children under the age of 8 and one of them was fresh out of the NICU, our experience with travel was vastly different. I mean, we certainly had medical things to worry about. We had seasonally, like, could we travel in the wintertime, or did it have to be in the summertime? And just all of, I think just wrapping my head around, like, is it even possible? Like, can we do this? I mean, I have a ton of kids, but I also have this kid who has a lot of needs, and I'm really anxious. Like, can he make this trip? And can we do this? Or are we going to be stuck in the middle of like a Airbnb or in a hotel or at a family member's house because the wheels fell off? I wasn't really sure what that was going to look like. And so I knew that this was timely as people are starting to make plans for the summer, or maybe dreaming about, can they even make plans for the summer? And maybe you're listening to this and maybe you have a child who has complex medical needs and you're just not sure if you can do it, or you're looking for some encouragement or some good practical advice. There is a woman in my life who I adore for many reasons, but I think that she can really give you all of those things: good practical advice, good encouragement, but also a dose of vulnerability and honesty as to this is what it's really like. So let's just have this great conversation. I have no doubt that you're going to love it. So Christy Wilkens is a mom to medically complex kids and a NICU nurse in training. I love that. She is the author of Awakening at Lourdes: How an Unanswered Prayer Healed Our Family and Restored Our Faith. And she writes and speaks a lot about disability, faith, and the power of community. She lives near Austin, Texas with her husband, Todd, and their 6 children. Christy, thanks for being here today. We have known each other just a few years. I was trying to do the math to figure out the first time that I met you. You were also with one of your kids, Oscar, who we're going to talk about in a little bit. But we met providentially. I think I was speaking, and then we had a mutual friend, and he was like, the two of you have to meet. And indeed, we had some similar threads to our stories. Everybody's is unique, but we had a lot of overlap. So I'm really glad that you're here.
Yeah. I am always glad to be with you.
Well, you have such a beautiful family. So you are a mom of 6 children, and Oscar is your youngest. And I like to say sometimes the babies like to throw us for a little bit of a loop. So while I know that you didn't spend time in the NICU with Oscar, you have spent plenty of time with him in the hospital. So maybe give us and people who are listening a little bit of an idea as to when you started to notice things were maybe a little bit different with Oscar and some of the ups and downs that you've had with him over the last several years.
Sure. So as you said, Oscar is our youngest of 6 kids. So he's 7 now, and my oldest is 17. He was typically developing when he was born, but he began having seizures at around 5 months. Or I should say, that's when we noticed them. It's entirely possible they had been going on in his sleep for a long time before that. But that moment, it was actually his 5-month birthday. That was the beginning of a long, slow unfolding. I often refer to it as his slow motion train wreck. And where we are today is that he has a lot of sort of individual piecemeal diagnoses, but we don't have the one diagnosis that explains everything that's going on with him. In terms of his abilities, he really still needs maximum assist with most of his activities of daily living. So He can self-feed pretty well. He just learned to walk a few months ago, which was super exciting on my birthday, no less. But he needs help with dressing, bathing. He's still in diapers. He still needs a lot of mobility support, even though he can walk short distances. He's got a lot of medications, and he's also been on a ketogenic diet for medical reasons to help with seizure control since he was about 8 months old. So, a lot of complexity, a lot of equipment, a lot of just really physical heavy lifting from day to day. But he's also super fun and a joy to be around, and he loves people and he's really social. So, traveling with him has actually been really exciting. We love the way he just lights up when he gets to go somewhere new.
Well, I know some people may be hearing that. So they're hearing one, they hear 6 kids and people automatically say, oh my gosh, how do you do anything with 6 kids? And then they hear Oscar's story and maybe they're thinking, okay, so that sounds like a lot. Like, does Christy just stay home all day? Like, do they ever leave their house? And I know you do because I have seen you out with your family. Um, Maybe give people, I guess, an idea of where you guys have traveled, like how you have traveled, whether by air or by car, and then where you have gone so people can kind of get a sense of where you've been aside from outside of the confines of your home, because I think sometimes people hear that and they might feel a little overwhelmed, like, how is that possible? And I know it's possible because y'all do it.
Well, I want to be honest about the fact that Oscar in our life definitely changed a lot about the rhythm of our family and our adventures. Like we were a traveling family before Oscar came along, and it took us a while to feel comfortable getting back to that. And even today, we stay home more now than we did before because of the reality of what it's like to live with Oscar. Having said that, like you, we have an enormous van. We actually just upgraded to a wheelchair van in 2020, and we've taken road trips with Oscar as far as Minnesota, North Carolina, and New Mexico. And we live in Texas. So those are really long distances, and we've done all of those trips with the whole family.
Well, I mean,
Um,
it's certainly a
when
you
he was
gotta just get
younger,
out of you
oh,
just
go
gotta
ahead.
get out of Texas first. That's the first
Yeah,
trip.
just getting out of Texas is a
Right,
several hour endeavor.
right.
When he was younger, we also did travel by plane a couple of times. So I took him to New York City. That was actually for a medical appointment, but we did a little sightseeing as well. And then we traveled to Lourdes, France. And there was one glorious fall where we took the whole family on a Caribbean cruise. So that was fun.
So those are a few places. So I think that certainly you've probably had some of those trips that went maybe just as you had planned because maybe you had done some things beforehand, or maybe or maybe you got there and you're like, okay, so this wasn't really in my plan, which is usually the way that it works with our family, even with all of our children who are able-bodied and can do all sorts of things. I know that sometimes you get there and you're like, well, this was not in the brochure. This didn't go the way that I thought. What, Christy, what are some things that you learned whenever you had your kids and you were working with Oscar? Because I know that our desire as parents is that we want our children to experience the world. We want them to see the best of what is out there, but we also recognize that sometimes it's our position as a parent to be a good advocate for them. So, what are some things, Christy, that you did to sort of help your other children experience what you wanted them to see, but also really involve Oscar in that as well?
Yeah, that's a great question. Well, and I'm sure you saw me laughing when you were saying travel going according to plan, because I can't think of a time that that has ever actually happened. Like, something always goes wrong. Um, so I need to be honest about the fact that even now, I never feel 100% safe and secure when we travel with Oscar. Like, I really have to acknowledge that anxiety and just bring it alongside me every step of the way. That's especially true when we're traveling through remote areas, as happens a lot when we're on a road trip. So the way that I deal with that is just kind of by acknowledging the risk, like it's real, and consulting with his medical team ahead of time, and weighing that risk, which is very real, against the benefit, as you said, of creating these memories with him and for him as a family, right? We want Oscar to experience the world as much as his siblings do, as much as possible. And it's really a joy for them to watch Oscar experience the world. You know, like sometimes, especially as your kids get older, you're traveling with teens, they can get kind of jaded, but there's something just so delightful about watching Oscar have fun in new places. It's like he has this childlike sense of wonder and joy, and he really infects the whole family with it. So that's been amazing. Um, Generally, we only travel with him whenever he's medically stable. So for us, that means his seizures have to be well controlled and that nothing about his symptoms or his situation has changed dramatically in the recent past. So there actually were two family trips where that was not the case. And I stayed home with him while my husband Todd took the rest of our kids on our planned summer trip. So I guess, kind of in general, you don't want to take unnecessary risks and you always have to have a plan B. For us, a lot of that is about always being aware of how many supplies you have left. So we
Right.
had a couple shorter trips where we had to bail early or we had to pivot. There was one time where we had to rent a car and split up to get Oscar home because our van had broken down and we didn't have enough meds to wait for it to be fixed. So it's definitely a balancing act. But for us, on the trips where we have taken Oscar, even if they've gone a little awry, the benefits and the memories that we build as a family have outweighed the risks and the hassles and the changes in plan that have to happen sometimes.
Well, you brought up two things that I want to dive into. One is your kids, your other kids. So I know that sometimes, God bless them, your other kids don't see the bigger picture. They're not adults yet, so they don't understand the longer term effects or just the complexities of having a kid who has a lot of medical challenges. So, what do you do when your kids push back when they're like, seriously, mom, like, did they ever say to you, like, we feel like Oscar is ruining this, or this is so frustrating because we had in our mind that we wanted it to be this way and now we have to change? Like, did you have to navigate? I know you've got a wide range of kids. Did you have to navigate some of that pushback? Or maybe you didn't. Maybe Oscar's joy sort of helped them get out of their crankiness. We always like to say, you can get happy in the same pants you got mad in. That's what we tell our kids. So I don't know how y'all have dealt with any of the, I guess, the normal sibling dynamics of being disappointed, but then adding in Oscar, how have you guys navigated that?
That's a really good question. A couple things. One is that we've gotten really good at the divide and conquer approach. So, as much as possible, we try not to take the tack that, oh, sorry, we have to stop doing this fun thing because Oscar. We really try very hard not to let that dynamic get set up in the first place. Um, so the way that that looks on the ground is that if Oscar's having a hard time or something's going on, one of us splits off with him. And sometimes we'll take an extra kid or two if another kid is having a hard time.
Right.
That definitely happens. Um, but we try to keep the momentum going for as many people as possible for as long as we can. It doesn't always work. And there are definitely days where we have to pack it in. Usually when Oscar reaches that point, it's very clear to everyone. And it's not a lot of fun for them. You know, if Oscar's not having fun, no one's having fun. He's definitely had some bad days. I will also say though that we have some other kids, and I don't talk about them as publicly, but we have some other kids who have some medical challenges and some quirks. And so as a family, I think we've just gotten used to the mindset that you never know what's going to happen.
Yeah.
So our kids, and I'm grateful for this. I feel really blessed that they have this level of maturity, but they really do know how to roll with the punches. And we've gotten pretty good as a family at not pinning that on any one person and just acknowledging like, this is life. Sometimes our plans have to change and we are willing to do what we have to do to accommodate the needs of any particular individual in any given moment.
Well, I think you also bring up a really good point is that kids who have different needs than their siblings also require us to sacrifice for people that we love,
Mhm.
which requires us to grow and be less selfish. And I think that sometimes when you are a sibling or a family member of a child who has extra needs, that you sort of step outside of yourself and say, okay,
Mhm.
so this is maybe not just about me, that there are other people that we love in this family and that we're going to sacrifice this thing because we know there are other things that they have to sacrifice for us. So I think I don't know, it's it's good encouragement for me to hear that with a few kids around, that it's nice to know that they learn to grow as they get older, they learn to adapt, and it becomes their normal. So then when they're presented with a situation, maybe with another family or in another place, they are largely unaffected because that is how they have grown up.
Yeah.
That is what they've gotten used to. So when it comes to you and Todd, so Todd is your husband, and one of you has to split off. I know sometimes, Christy, in the early days, like I found myself being maybe a little resentful, like, really? Like we had this sort of beautiful
Mhm.
thing planned and these beautiful memories, and now I'm having to do the thing that I tell my kids to do all the time is let's be joyful. Let's, let's see the lesson in this. Um, but I would suspect that that probably put a little bit of a strain and maybe we'll call it an opportunity to communicate with your spouse about how you find the joy in that instead of feeling the resentment.
Yes. Whew. You're not coming at me with the softballs
I'm
today,
sorry. I eased you in, like I
Catherine.
eased you in, but now I'm asking you some harder questions.
I'd be lying if I said that the resentment wasn't there sometimes. I think we all feel it, right? It's
Sure.
it's a really heavy burden that we carry sometimes, and it's hard to carry that um, with great joy in every moment of our lives. Todd and I have come a long way. I will say the counseling helped, but we really try hard to advocate for each other instead of for ourselves, if that makes sense.
Oh, I love that.
So one thing we tell our kids is that if you're looking out for yourself, you have one person looking out for you. But if everyone else is looking out for you and you let them and you trust that they are going to have your needs in mind, then you've got seven other people looking out for you all of a sudden. So really, I consider it my job to look out for the needs of everyone else. And then I trust that they're going to be looking out for mine and that we're all working to find that balance, right? So if someone needs to step out with Oscar, sometimes it's me, sometimes it's Todd. Sometimes it's some of our older kids or even our younger kids, depending where we are, if we're in a safe place. And we really try to make it possible for all of us to share both in the burden, but in the joy of getting to serve Oscar in that way, right? And to acknowledge that his needs are different and that we're privileged to be able to step into these moments with him and to help ease his suffering and to help bring him back when he's ready. um, there's something really special about being able to provide that kind of individual attention to somebody who needs it. And like you said, it's an opportunity for growth, um, personally, socially, emotionally, and that's never a bad thing, even when it's a hard thing.
I love that you're asking your kids to look out for each other and for you and your husband. That's ooh, I'm
Keyword
taking
there is
notes too.
asking.
Well, we always make requests of our kids, whether they respond to something. I'm like sitting here writing that down. That's really good. This podcast is produced by Hand to Hold, a national nonprofit, but we're more than simply a podcast. Be sure to download our app, join one of our support groups, or find one-to-one support, enjoy counseling, find loss and bereavement support, participate in a peer-to-peer mentor program, or check out our news, articles, and family stories at handtohold.org. All of that is at no cost to you. Hand to Hold's mission is to provide personalized support before, during, and after a NICU stay to help ensure that all NICU families thrive. Now, okay, so we're gonna switch gears a minute, and I want to dive into some practical stuff. So, when you are getting ready to take a road trip or getting ready to get on an airplane, Christy, what are some practical things that you do that you found to be really helpful and maybe ease some of the stress and maybe be able to handle the inevitable changes to the plan that are going to occur? So, practically, what do you think might be helpful for some people to think about as they plan a road trip or an airplane trip?
Yep. First things first, always check in with your medical team. We have an amazing primary care team for Oscar, and it's a clinic that's specifically for medically complex kids. So their job is to help us coordinate with all his specialists. So whenever we do plan a trip, we always share our plans with them. We tell them where we're going, when we're leaving, how long we're going to be gone, and they help us to think through the planning and the possibilities. And we're also really fortunate that they're available 24/7 via phone or text. So I know not everyone has that level of access, but we do, and it really helps us to feel safe. But whatever level of access you have, you know that your child's primary medical team is there for you. So don't be afraid to ask them, and don't be afraid to let them know what's going on. Um, I overplan. Always, I'm an overplanner, especially around travel. We're really lucky that
You're not the
Oscar
only
has
one.
always been a
I'm an
yeah, I
overplanner too.
know.
You're fine.
Kindred spirits, right? That's one
Yes.
other thing we share. He's a really good traveler. So for us, it's mostly about the logistics. We have a ton of checklists. We pack things the same way every time so that it's easy to see that you've got it all. And honestly, practice makes perfect. Like we still to this day, we take a lot of day trips or overnight trips just as small rehearsals, right? And the more that you do that, the more you kind of get into the rhythm of knowing what you need, knowing where it needs to be. Um, no, like take the low risk trip so that if you forget something, you don't forget it on the high risk trip because that's happened to us before. Um, Always be prepared for the extra delays because you never know when you'll have to make a stop to deal with something. That's true for any kid. It is doubly true for any kids with medical needs. Um, and then you have to know what soothes your child, right? So for Oscar, he loves lights, he loves music, he loves vibration. We bring a ton of distractions along with us. It's going to add extra bulk, it's extra packing, but it's completely necessary for survival on the road.
Those are good. I'm sitting here thinking, when we go on our next road trip, I'm gonna call Christy to come plan everything. I love it. Yeah, so this is a little bit of a twist on a something that we touched on before, but I know oftentimes when we're out, so we're big national park people, so we go to national parks. So again, those are in remote areas, so we have to do a little planning,
Mm-hmm.
ask our doctors. But we often will run into families who have a child in a wheelchair or who has special equipment. And my kids certainly, those are not foreign to them. So it's a
Mm-hmm.
normal thing for them to see. But for a family, maybe, Christy, that is traveling and sees another another family traveling and they see all this equipment, two things. What's one thing that they can do, I guess, to encourage that family? Like, it is a good thing that you are out and we are happy that you are here. And then the second part to that is how can we be of assistance to them, whether it's educating our children or doing something for that family? What are some things that y'all have experienced of people sort of pouring into you whenever you've been on the road to encourage you to keep doing it?
So the simplest answer to that is to approach those families the way you would approach any other family, right? Like if you see a mom and a dad and they're struggling with their three young kids and hauling a car seat and a diaper bag and a stroller, our natural instinct as families, I think, is just to smile, right? Like to offer that eye contact and the thumbs up, like you got this, mama. If you see that someone is like struggling with all their equipment, say, hey, can I lift that for you? Do you want me to stay here and like herd your kids while you're organizing your bag? I feel very lucky that we've never dealt with any rudeness. We've never had anyone who was really intrusive. We've never had anyone who stared. We've never really even had anyone look or behave in a way that was judgmental, even when Oscar was having a hard moment. For the most part, I feel like the people we've encountered while we've been traveling have been very compassionate, very friendly. Um, and I know when we're traveling, sometimes we might, be sitting in the airport waiting lounge or waiting in line for a ride with another family, and you just start to chat naturally, like, "Hey, where are you from? What are you doing here? Tell me about your kids." And I think it's really important to allow those conversations to happen when they're happening naturally. Sometimes that may go far enough down the road that you feel comfortable sharing about your kid's diagnosis and what's going on, but sometimes it's just about making that human contact and helping people see that your family is just like other families. You're just out to have a good time. You're on vacation. Um, and vacation is a really special time to make some of those human connections. So I think it's important to make the space for that.
No, I think it's a good reminder to all of us that we see the beautiful part of traveling is that you always encounter people who live differently than you, look differently than you, see the world
Mm-hmm.
differently than you. And more than anything, I'm hopeful that whenever we go places like that, that our kids' hearts are expanding as much as their brains are expanding, that they see people where they are and sort of meet them where they are. And then, like you said, I think that's maybe the best advice is just to let that happen organically. You're not this is not an inquisition, right? Like you're not your goal is not to find out the whole medical history of whatever family that you're encountering, but rather just to see them as a family. I think that is maybe the
Mm-hmm.
best advice along the way. So I know that there are lots of people thinking about traveling or thinking about where could we maybe go. Maybe it won't be this summer, but maybe it'll be like at a certain place. The one thing that I wanted to ask you before we close, I have two last questions. One is, when did y'all, Christy, feel comfortable in saying, sort of in making the leap? I know you talked about making some of those. I like those test trips where you just go a little bit so the pain
Hmm.
is not so big if you forget something. But when did y'all feel when you go from this really critical, like we need to get Oscar stable? So how did you get from there to even being okay to take a trip? Like what were some of the things that you did to be like, I know you said that you acknowledged the risk, but how did you get to a place that you're like, all right, we're going to try this. Like we're going to just get out there and do it. What allowed you to sort of take that leap?
Yeah, really good medical support. And, in some cases, the thing that forced us to take the leap was medical necessity. Like we had to take him to Houston to see the specialist. We had to take him to New York to get the second opinion. Um, so knowing in both of those cases that we were heading towards a place where we had medical support on the other side was really helpful. But that's something I think about now every time we take him anywhere. I always look at our destination and I think to myself, where can I get supplies if I need them? Where's the closest hospital? Sometimes I'll even check in with our medical team and be like, who do you know in this place that we're going to? What kind of help can we get there if we need it? Um, there are definitely a lot of other ducks to get in a row. So I did a lot of online research, asking a lot of the same questions that you're asking. Um, it's important to make sure that you're following all of the rules and regulations of the FAA if you're going through an airport. So for us, that means when we have to travel with all of his ketogenic food and formula, we bring a signed letter from his doctor explaining what's going on. And even with that, often they'll make us unpack every single thing we've packed for him, swab it all down. We get the full pat. Like it's not easy, so you have to allow the time for that. Um, we're flying with him this summer, and we really haven't flown with him in about 6 years. So this is going to be another big test case for us. And so we're in a whole different land in terms of mobility and seating and what kind of support he's going to need on the plane. Last time he was basically still a lap infant. We strapped him into his car seat. That was it. We can't do that this time. So we're planning a call with the airline's disability service, trying to ask them what they can provide, explain to them what he might need, and we'll do the same thing at every step along the way through the airport. So the gate check, the flight attendants. We're not going to pre-board because it means he'll have to sit still and quiet for longer. So we'll ask them to help us get on at the last possible moment. Um, it can be really difficult to feel confident, but I think the more questions you ask ahead of time, the more people you involve ahead of time, because a lot of these people have more experience with this than we do. Your doctors have probably helped other families plan trips. The airlines have helped other passengers with disabilities. So you can draw on their experience. But trying to sort of think through the entire journey, start to finish, and at every sort of critical point, think about here's the plan A, but what would a plan B look like? Even if you don't necessarily plan it all the way down to the nitty gritty, you can know, okay, well, if this happens, here's something we might try. If this happens later, here's something we might try. And just knowing that something is going to change, something that you have planned is not going to work out, and be ready to pivot and know who the people who can help you pivot are.
I'm listening to you say that, and I don't even think that we mentioned this, but you are getting ready and you are in the process of becoming a nurse. And I just can't help but think, one, Oscar has prepared you well, but also what a gift you will be to your patients, Christy, as you navigate big and small things both in the hospital and also giving them the courage to do things outside of the hospital. Those are going to be some
Mm-hmm.
lucky patients. I know that that's been a beautiful journey for you. It's been fun to watch that sort of transpire, but what a reservoir of experience and knowledge that you will have when you move into that career. It's been fun to watch that. Um, so my
Oh,
last
thank you.
question is pretty simple, actually. What is your best advice to a parent who's listening who wants to travel? What's the one singular piece of advice that you would give them to give them the confidence to get out there and do it?
Trust yourself. Trust yourself. You know your kid. You know what you're capable of. Trust yourself and go for it. there are all these other things you can do to help yourself feel more prepared, but ultimately, you know your family and you know your kid. So take the practice trips, ask your doctors, ask your friends, ask the internet, but ultimately, the risk is worth it. Take the plunge. I really don't think that you will regret creating more opportunities to have these really special memories with your kid and with your whole family.
That's like the perfect way to end it. So today's 2-minute take after my conversation with Christy, I think the overarching theme of really that whole conversation was about trust. I mean, primarily trust in yourself that you are capable and knowledgeable to ask the right questions, to seek out the right solutions, and trust in your family, whatever that may look like. I think the thing that I loved the most that Christy said was how she talked about if I'm just the one looking out for myself, it's just me. But if I look out for the other people in my family, I have all these other people looking out for me, and then I'm trusting that they are doing the same. I thought that may have been the most revolutionary thing that I heard in there, in that we are a unit, we are a team, and we're not just focusing on this one person, but whether we are better together. I think that's really what I took from everything, and knowing that it could be possible. You could be able to get on an airplane or get in a car, and for however long that may be, for however short that may be, but that those lives can be impacted, not just your family, but the people that you encounter along the way. And we didn't even get to this in the interview, so I'm going to put these in the show notes. Christy has a whole long list of things that they use and products that they love that help make travel less stressful, which I think is what most of us are looking for, no matter what our families look like, is that we're trying to figure out how can we make great memories and not be so stressed out. And so I love that she has this whole list of things. So be sure to check out the show notes for that. You can find Christy online at CSA Wilkens. She's also ChristyWilkens.com. Her website, you can get her book there. But I hope that if you needed some encouragement with a child who has a lot of medical complexities, or you have a child who has a disability, that Christy gave you some encouragement and that faith that you can trust in yourself and also the people around you, that you're going to have a beautiful time wherever you may be going this summer. So with that, I will see y'all next time. Thanks, y'all, for listening to NICU Babies Parent Support. Every parent and every experience is welcome here. If you are a NICU parent and you're finding yourself in need of support, please download our app. You can find it in the Apple Store or on Google Play, Hand to Hold. And if you love today's episode, you can share it, you can subscribe, and you can most certainly review it. We would love, love, love your reviews. It's how we reach more NICU parents. Thanks, and I'll see y'all next time.